Okay, awesome. So my name is Madeline Buzzeo. I am a senior undergrad at Delaware Valley University studying sustainable agriculture. And as said before, my project and presentation is towards aligning conservation, wildlife outcomes, and agriculture production. So how this kind of got into creation is I have a friend, he is a zoo science major, and he's really into conservation. And then I'm also very much into agriculture, and we wanted to do a research project, and we didn't really know how to marry the two so that it both really interested in him and really interested me. And then we were finding some literature, and we actually saw, oh no,
Oh, you might want to use the down.
there we go. We found literature from the United States and outside the United States saying that there were conflicts happening between farmers and conservationists because of the conflicting interests. So for our purpose, we wanted to identify wildlife conservation biologists and livestock farmers' perceptions of predator threats and control methods to be able to bridge the gaps in between their two like knowledges. And we found, looking at Emma Maris's book, Wild Souls, she poses a question: how do we balance the rights of introduced species with those already established within an ecosystem? And then also Swan down there, he suggests that both have different perceptions and perspectives of what agriculture is and what conservation is. So this is kind of the introduction point, part 2. We use mental models to kind of look at and visualize the differences in the perceptions and the ideas that each population has. And for our methods for data collection, we sent out 2 surveys, one to farmers and then one to conservationists. And they asked a couple of questions, basic demographic questions, then some ranking questions, vignette questions, and then also these open-ended questions. And here are some of the demographics. So most of the conservationists that we have were about 45 to 54 years old. And then this was their years of experience, which you can't really see, but they were all kind of spread out between like 1 to 5 years to like 30, 40 plus years. Then this is kind of going with the mental models. When we ask our open-ended questions, I go in and I read the responses and I look for like keywords or phrases that fit with kind of these themes. So when I ask the question, what is your definition of livestock predation? I could get a very basic answer of wildlife killing livestock. So I would code, basically, it's not on here because this is for the code book for a different question, but I would code death for dead. And then I would also code non-domestic because they're referencing wildlife and because some conservationists brought up feral animals, domesticated animals getting out and such. So for this question right here, it was define some strategies that you can suggest for handling wildlife predation, livestock predation. So we had lethal, which meant if the conservationist was suggesting like a lethal method of just killing the predator. Non-lethal, we had 2 options, passive and active. Passive was putting something like a barrier or something in place that wasn't directly going out and getting the predator. And then active was either trapping or relocating, just something that was more for specifically the predator. Then we also had legality of the action. So if they were recognizing that something that they were doing was legal or not legal, we had some responses that basically said, I could do this, but it's not legal. Like I could just go and shoot this animal, but I probably shouldn't because it's a protected species. Then we had economic. some folks mentioned that they could build fences and new barns, but that's not something that's in the scope of a farmer because it is so expensive at times. Then finally, they mentioned like types of predators. If they specifically reference a predator, we had terrestrial, aerial, protected species, the domestic and non-domestic. And then all the way at the bottom, if they talked about a certain type of livestock that they were referencing, so poultry, cattle, sheep, and then the broad livestock. So this is what the mental model looks like. Unfortunately, all of the data that I collected and coded got left in Pennsylvania. So this is like an older model of what we have when we did like a first round of coding. This is what they normally look like. And you can see like the thicker lines here, they show the strongest connections and kind of just the most connected ideas and concepts. So for the conservationist ideas, one quote that I pulled out because I was able to look at my Excel spreadsheet, which had the responses. To me, predation is the price of doing business. I do not believe predator control is necessary. So a lot of the conservationists emphasized non-lethal tactics and fences and walls and barriers that farmers could do, and not necessarily going out and killing the predator. While the farmers had a little bit different idea of going out, killing the predator, and just removing the threat completely. So the conservationists also emphasize education of farmers, the utilization of government programs that are in place to help and be an extension to farmers. And then they also, as I said before, really emphasize a predator-first approach and putting more of them before the livestock themselves. Another thing I want to note is that they had mentioned there's so many of these livestock animals, but there's one predator that's the problem. You should be expecting a loss. So just kind of what this quote is saying too. So for my conclusion and application, we found that wildlife biologists have more of a broad knowledge of the general topic of wildlife predation and are more disconnected from the topic itself. When looking at the mental models, the farmers had a lot of stories and personal connections to the animals they're taking care of and to the topic itself. And then the wildlife biologists are kind of pulling from a textbook in a sense. Like they learned about this, they know what to do about it, but it's not almost pulling at their heartstrings in a sense. So how we can kind of bridge these gaps of knowledge. We wanted to focus thinking about solving the conflict between the two parties before it happens. So starting education in the classroom, specifically for conservationists, trying to get them prepared for being able to go out and seek a conservationist or a farmer, or being able to talk to a farmer and really be mindful of what they're saying so they're not putting like a farmer on the defense in a sense and feel like they're attacking the farmer. And then we also wanted to note that there are the interdisciplinary approaches. So not only a conservationist can think of, oh, well, you can put up a fence. There are other things like then putting up like physical barriers that a farmer could do. He can move livestock to a different place or a different surrounding. But these ideas and stuff have to be like communicated, and getting the ideas to the farmer is kind of like the hard part in a sense. And then the other reason why we don't have like specifically have farmers in the presentation is because we only got like 5 responses. So we got 79 conservationist responses, and then farmers was about like 9, 10-ish. And then out of like the open-ended questions, the farmers, about 4 farmers answered them. So and listening to conversations just this past weekend, it seems like some of the farming population is very closed off, and they're very kind of guarded in a sense. So I think definitely starting a conversation in like my classroom at Delaware, talking about like livestock production and stuff, and being aware of resources that farmers do have when dealing with the problem. They don't have to just deal with it themselves as well. So starting conversations in the classroom before this like conflict happens is probably like the best bet, so that we can kind of move on. And as this knowledge gets brought down and stuff, it'll become a general knowledge and not just like a new practice or something like that. So are there any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
You said that the farmers were guarded. Can you explain that a little further?
Yeah, and I was listening to a conversation. It seemed like there was a person who was talking about approaching a farmer and talking about conservation. And it sounded like this farmer almost like shut down, was very against the idea, because when they hear conservation or protected species, they think maybe that their land is getting taken away or something is going to happen to their livelihood. And I don't think that's necessarily the case with the conservationist, but the conservationist isn't thinking that way. And the point, like bridging the gap between the knowledge, is thinking the conservationist may react this, the farmer may react this way. How can I approach the farmer without seeming like a threat to his family or to his livelihood in a sense? Yes.
Yeah, I see that part of your data was collecting economic information in terms of costs and so forth. Did you do a crosswalk between the mental models and some of the economic information? I'm thinking, for example, like farmers that are under more economic stress for whatever reason, and like close to the margins and all that, that would change their mental models in terms of how they perceive the predation as a threat to their livelihoods.
We didn't really do that. It was more of a seeing if they had like an an idea of like the farmer could spend more or something like that. It wasn't like specifically connected to that. Yes.
Were there any successful relationships built between farmers and a conservationist biologist that you saw that were more personal, or?
There was one response. Yes. There was one response where a conservationist talked about building a rapport with other landowners and trying to really be a resource and almost like a friendly face. And that was one response that we had gotten, and that was really nice to see. Dr. Randy.
You had the opportunity to read 79 statements from the Pennsylvania Commonwealth wildlife biologists, which gives you kind of this lens, this expertise now. What did you read about their perception strategies that someone, say, teaching wildlife and conservation management students can bring into the classroom to help them maybe change their perspectives a little bit when they do engage farmers?
There was an emphasis on education, like I had mentioned before, and some of the conservationists had said, like, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought.
So someone teaching conservation students, now that you have the opinion and perspective of all these people in the field that think a certain way, what could someone teaching these students that may go and become this wildlife biologist, what can they do in the classroom to help them have maybe more open-mindedness when they engage farmers and people in it?
I think if they got if you're like building a curriculum into this, maybe if they got some farm experience, for one, if they went out and were helping people and not just sitting like behind a desk and learning about it, and got some hands-on knowledge, they would really understand what a farmer is going through. And then also if they got some type of education on just regular terminology that like, this is a ewe, this is like a steer, so they can better kind of even communicate with a farmer in a sense, so that like, if a conservation is like, oh, your cows, it's just to make it more personable and more connected in that sense as well. Any other questions?
I would also add, not talking down to farmers, know where you're at when you're speaking. Don't use words that they might not, use common words, common language, yeah. I'm not the presenter,
I agree.
but I'm a farmer, so.
Yes.
I really enjoyed that, like, even, like, you were very transparent with the fact that you had, like, so little farmer responses, and that you didn't just take those 5 and, like, build, like, a mental model for that, and then, like, compare it to the conservationists, and then, like, leave out the information of, like, your data samples, so I thought that was very nice.
Thank you. Yes.
What would you change about, I'm sorry, I missed the introduction of what you talked about. If you were to do this again, do you think there'd be something you could change in your questioning that would maybe engage the farmers a little better?
Yeah.
Get more of a response.
More response. Probably to maybe approach people in person.
That's what I was gonna say. Like, I know a lot of farmers and a lot of them are older. They're not about to fill out any type of
Yeah.
email survey or, they just don't have time. They're not interested.
Yeah.
They might not know how to navigate technology in that way, but so approaching.
Yeah, because our survey was sent mostly online. I think we did an ad in one of the farming newspapers, but that was about it. So definitely being more accessible to farmers then. Yes.
Was there an incentive for farmers to fill this out?
Yes, we had we were giving away like 3 $50 gift cards. So that was like a little incentive, and it was just a random draw. Yes.
Also wondering maybe about time of year too, like when.
Yeah.
Surveys went out. The academic calendar doesn't mesh necessarily with the farming calendar.
Yeah. Yeah, the survey went out around, it was out for a month, around March, mid-March to early April is when we were taking surveys.
That's a hard.
Yeah.
Hard sell.
Are there any other questions? We need to move on. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.